In 2024, something peculiar happened that I don't think I would have thought too much about, except for the fact that it happened twice. The first instance was that Transformers 1 and The Wild Robot, two animated films starring robots, were both supposed to be released on the 20th of September. But then in April, it was announced that The Wild Robot was being delayed to the 27th instead, 1 week after its initial release date. The same phenomenon would happen again 3 months later. Wicked and Moana 2, both fantasy musical films, were meant to be released on November 27, but then in July, it was announced that Wicked had decided to release 1 week earlier instead, on November 22. Two pairings of films of similar genres and meant to release on the same day, but then one film flinches and moves its release date 1 week earlier or later. How did this game of cinematic chicken happen twice in 1 year? And which film ended up grossing more money at the box office anyway? Well, with Transformers 1 and The Wild Robot, it's easy to see why the latter film would be the one to make the release date change. Transformers is an extremely well-known franchise, while The Wild Robot is a brand new cinematic property. Sure, it's based on a book that's fairly popular, but not Harry Potter level popular, and nothing compared to the popularity of the Transformers films. So of course DreamWorks would want to play it safe, especially since Transformers 1 was never supposed to compete with them in the first place. As early as 2022, an animated Transformers film was announced to have a release date of July 19, 2024, but then got delayed to September 13, and it would have remained that way if not for a name that I'm not supposed to say thrice.
The deuce is loose.
Beetlejuice had a release date of September 6. So while Transformers 1 wouldn't have been competing with it on the exact same weekend, the Tim Burton sequel is still expected to eat up a lot of September cash. So, on April 18, it was announced that Transformers 1 would see a September 20 release instead. And 5 days later, on April 23, it was the Wild Robot's turn to announce they were changing release dates as well. With Wicked and Moana 2, Wicked switch was probably because of two reasons. The first being that Moana 2 was never supposed to be. It was supposed to be a 5 episode Disney Plus show, but it was turned into a theatrical film late into production, and got announced as Moana 2 in February 2024, only 9 months before its intended release. Wicked suddenly found itself with some unexpected competition. Unlike The Wild Robot though, it took a while for Wicked to officially decide to change its release date, which is where the second reason comes in. And that reason, of course, is a tiny animated film that you may have heard of.
And the Riley we knew is gone.
And if Joy can't see that, well, then she's delusional.
Delusional? Of course I'm delusional!
Yes, before it was overtaken by Nezha 2 in 2025, Inside Out 2 was the highest grossing animated film of all time. It only took the movie 6 weeks to reach this throne. And while Wicked Shift was announced before that happened, the rapid growth of Inside Out 2's gross definitely signaled the power of Disney sequels at the box office. This now meant that Wicked was competing against Gladiator 2, and neither film had anything to worry about. They're both very different films for very different audiences. Wicked's move was a smart decision, given that Moana 2 was always going to be a smash hit, and there was no way Disney was going to budge with the release date. Thanksgiving weekend has always been Disney's weekend. Now, similar situations like this have happened before. The most famous example, at least in recent years, was when Batman vs. Superman was moved from May to March, avoiding competition with Captain America Civil War. Though a Warner Brothers insider did say that they weren't flinching, so I guess it depends on whether or not you believe that. Still, there are far more examples of release dates being moved so as not to be within the same fortnight or month of competitors, than there are movies being moved so as not to share the exact same release date, especially not when they're in the same genre. So why did it happen twice in 1 year in 2024? I'll tell you why. Okay, so it's probably a little more than just that. Ticket sales have been doing pretty terribly since the pandemic. They've been on the decline since 2003. But the post-pandemic era was really when people were starting to consider the death of theaters, especially with the underperformance of films like Lightyear, Furiosa, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, all of which were based on popular IPs and should have at least broken even. Of course, Barbieheimer would then prove in 2023 that the death of theaters was exaggerated, but securing a box office hit in a post-pandemic world is still one of the biggest question marks on the planet. After all, even the MCU was believed to be untouchable until both Quantumania and the Marvels failed to break even. So yes, studios are most likely trying to play it as safe as possible when it comes to their releases. The thing is though, both Barbie and Oppenheimer managed to make big bucks in part, yes, because of the memes pairing them together, but also because neither one really got in each other's way. Same thing with Mamma Mia vs. The Dark Knight, which was also released on the same day on July 18, 2008. Different genres, different audiences. Transformers 1 and The Wild Robot were both animated family films centering around robots. and Wicked and Moana 2 were both fantasy musical films. Granted, the latter pair didn't have that much overlap if you really thought about it, as Wicked leaned more towards an older theater kid demographic, who grew up with Wicked and were probably in their 20s by the time the first Moana came out. But the decision makers of Wicked most likely wanted to play it as safe as seriously possible after Inside Out 2's success, which ended up being the smart move, given that Moana made over $1 billion, and Wicked only $756 million. Only. That being said, Wicked did win the Golden Globes for cinematic and box office achievement, while Moana 2 didn't even get nominated, which, I don't know, that category makes no sense to me. As for the Wild Transformers, Transformers 1 sadly ended up being a box office disappointment, only grossing $129 million against a budget of $75 million. The Wild Robot, on the other hand, was a commercial success, even garnering that useless box office achievement nomination. I don't know why, I mean, $333 million isn't that much money, but I guess PVOD sales were also satisfactory, as The Wild Robot 2 was confirmed only 2 weeks after the movie's release. It'd be an interesting story to say that the Transformers movies are trying to make less money now that the films are actually good, but that's just not true. The Transformers movies have been on a box office decline since The Last 9, possibly because people are burnt out with the franchise and want a long break from it. In conclusion, The Wild Robot somehow managed to win its imaginary box office battle with Transformers 1, despite the fact that it was the film that moved to avoid competition. And while Moana 2 technically won, Wicked still made a really great profit, proving their release date move to be a smart one. And that was a strange box office event that happened twice in 2024. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what your favorite movie of the 4 was. The Wild Robot would have to be mine. I love the book, and to nobody's surprise, the movie made me cry like a baby. And I'll see you in the next video.